Hello and welcome to all you astrology friends out there. Here is a video about Saturn in Pisces, and I'm going to talk about very shortly in general what this is all about, and then move to each and every single sign in a nutshell, of course, but just to have a flavor of what Saturn passing through your house exactly means. So first of all, when is this happening? It is happening around and about the 7th, 8th of March of this year of 2023, that Saturn will enter Pisces, the sign of Pisces, and will stay there for like 2.5 to 3 years. It'll stay there to the very last moment, you could say, up until February of 2026. So it's quite a period of time where Saturn transits the sign of the last sign of the zodiac, you could say the sign of Pisces. Yes, it's recording, Veerle. I was just checking. But so it has finished up. It's a couple of years in Aquarius, and now it is a totally new energy for all of us. Now, in a nutshell, of course, Saturn, we all know it as the planet of discipline, as the planet of hard work. And you know, I've been saying it plenty of times, we can look at astrology in a negative way if we want to, or we can embrace it, that energy, and try to work with it in a constructive way. I prefer to do that. I don't believe that the universe is positive or negative. It's neutral. And I think we as human beings can make the best out of any situation as much as we can, of course. We are not gods. But the same as with Saturn, often very young people or people who are a little bit older but are not used to take responsibility, to do the hard work in order to achieve something in the long run. People who are like that, of course, they're not going to like Saturn. But people who know in life that, who have some sort of a maturity in life, and sometimes that comes with young age and sometimes with a bit older, in age. But when you know that if you work hard for something, when you have that discipline, when you have healthy boundaries, when you have responsibility and you take responsibility for the self, you create a very beautiful structure. And that is what Saturn is all about. And that is, of course, why I always invite people to embrace Saturn during hard and harsh Saturn transits. But as I said, we always have this planet somewhere in our chart during the transiting of this energy. And what is Pisces all about? You could say that Pisces is a bit the opposite. So it's a planet of structure and discipline, a very slow planet, and it's entering a sign that is full of empathy, that is full of understanding, that is full of love, that is full of connection, no boundaries at all. So you can imagine that this is a bit of a weird combination to have, Saturn in Pisces. But again, it is what it is. And it is what we give it as an interpretation and a meaning. So you could say that very much in a nutshell, this is about structuring, you could say, your empathy, structuring and disciplining also the way how you see the world in a bit of a broader way, to do that every single day. And also to have some discipline, you could say, in a very good way, so that you can achieve the good sign of the good energy of Pisces, which is all about love and empathy and understanding and creativity. So it can be a very, very interesting transit here, and definitely one to have. I mean, if you are like an artist or a creator of some sorts and you have good boundaries, my goodness me, you can achieve a lot. Can you imagine what you can achieve with good and healthy boundaries? Not too much, not too little, but having that in some sort of a container. And the same with love, the same with, you could say, with the good side of going with the flow, but which is Pisces, but with good edges, with good boundaries, so that you don't go over top. So it's a kind of interesting combination for sure. Actually, if you look at it like Saturn in the 12th house, Saturn in Pisces, it's a lot about structuring the unconsciousness. So a lot of people would say like Saturn doesn't match in, it doesn't go well in Pisces. Well, if you look at the very ancient astrology, they say that Saturn crossing the 12th house, which is the Pisces house, that it is in its joy. And I definitely agree with that. Because when you make structure in the 12th house, which is the unconscious, which is a broad, having no boundaries kind of energy, when you make good structures there, it makes life way easier on planet Earth. Remember, we can talk about 5D energies and blah, 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 but we are here at the planet Earth, in planet Earth, and working with the 3D. So when Saturn transits Pisces or the 12th house, I always see, or people have that natally in a chart, I always see that they have like this very earthly kind of way of dealing with non-earthly things or with outer worldly things. So the 12th house, as that can be the negative side of the 12th house and of Pisces, is definitely wanting to escape, you know, going towards the blind spots that we have. The shadow of that is numbing oneself and not wanting to feel, because otherwise it feels too much. When you have structure here and when you have Saturn here, it can really, really help with mastering all of that. So I've seen it many, many times when Saturn passes someone's 12th house, that they during that period of 2.5 to 3 years, that they managed to battle their demons, so to speak, or their addictions, or whether it is smoking, drinking, whatever it is, working, love addictions, whatever it is, there is a possibility for having better boundaries. So that is definitely a very interesting position. So don't think that, oh, Saturn and Pisces, it's negative, but no, it's not like, according to dignities, it's quite neutral basically, but it's those different kind of energies. When you put them together, it's complementary. And that is what I invite everyone to go for. So I'm going to tell you definitely this, structuring the unconscious, structuring what is behind the surface, you could say, and therefore making your life a better place, because the 12th house has to do with health as well. You know, it's the house of hospitals and the house of prisons and so on. When you've got a good planet like Saturn there, it keeps the structure. It makes sure that you are disciplined and that you are not letting yourself go, basically. The self-sabotaging stuff, it's like Saturn saying, maturity here. So we all are going to have an energy of maturity in the areas of our life where we actually are very much go with the flow. So let's have a look at all the signs. For Aries people, this is in your 12th house. So Saturn has been for a long time in your 11th house. So I hope for you that you had a reality check and maybe a cooling down when it comes to connections with like-minded people and with friends, but that you now know where you're standing with friends, and that you have that you know the good ones versus the not so good ones, with not so good boundaries. And so it's less is more, basically, you could say, for Aries. And the same for your goals, that you have good goals, that you know where you're heading. And now Saturn in the 12th house for you Aries people is definitely about, it's a karmic thing, having Saturn for a couple of years in your 12th house. You know that Saturn does like 30 years for a whole circle. And Saturn and Pisces in your 12th house definitely is a cleaning up, you could say. It's a cleaning up of the closet, figuratively. But it definitely means a cleaning up of old karma, of old patterns, of old, you could say, because Saturn rules your 10th house of work and of your goals and your friends. It's also a cleaning up of that. It's still a continuation. So you could really think behind the scenes, because the 12th house is a house behind the scenes, that, okay, within 2-3 years, I'm going to do something different with my work, for instance. And you're cleaning up, you're really doing this closure. It's a lot about closure. It's also a lot about maturity. When it comes to old habits, that is such a beautiful thing, basically. Although it's not easy, but you're getting time for it. This is not done in a week or so. This is done in a couple of years. You know, you've got time up until February 2026, how to figure this out, how to structure and how to mature more for patterns that you're doing that are no longer serving you. And it's easier said than done, you know, even for Aries people. Aries people are known that they finish up one thing and they don't look back. But having Pisces as your 12th house, it shows that there is this letting go energy of something that you were strongly attached to, but that was not positive for you. Again, it could be a person, it could be a job, it could probably more a job. And when it comes to a person, probably more to the friend kind of connections. But that is very general, the horoscope that I'm doing here. But it's definitely a battling that you can start here. If you have had an addiction of some sorts for many, many years and you're fed up with it, and this transit could definitely prompt you into battling it and doing it from, you know, like a real mature person, which means consistently, day by day, but day by day, really have to do effort to achieve that. And for many others, this is karmic, you know, karmic energy of family patterns that you've been dealing with, or reaction patterns that you have, for instance, that need to be cleaned up, basically. So definitely for you, this all happens behind the scenes, but it's definitely yes, it's one of the best transits, Saturn in its joy in the 12th house. Again, when you are conscious of it, it makes the unconscious also very much conscious. So if you are, it depends what kind of person you are. If you are an Aries person who doesn't want to look at yourself, who doesn't want to look internally, and who doesn't want to grow in life, and who doesn't want to become a better version of yourself, then this could be tricky, because life will force you to look at yourself. And again, slowly but surely. So you don't have to attack this and to battle this all of a sudden. It's with slowly but surely structuring that very unconscious world, you could say, and that very unconscious energy that is actually a lot doing the decision work in your life, because it's the 12th house. It's I always think of Freud, right? When we look at that as the unconscious. So you're gonna spot some blind spots, and when you welcome that, it can make really a difference, because when Saturn will be then in your sign in Aries, it's a whole new start. I know a lot of astrologers will probably also not really like Saturn in the first house, but and that is true when you're very young. Like when you're having a Saturn transit crossing your ascendant at 12 years old, it's totally different than when you have this at 30 years old, for instance. So the older you are, the better it is to have Saturn crossing your ascendant, because it means a totally new setup of your life. But that is for Saturn in the first house. Taurians, Taurus people, this is for you, Saturn in Pisces in your 11th house. Now, Pisces goes well with Taurus, so this is not, therefore, because Saturn goes very well with Taurus, therefore it's a little bit less negative, you could say, or less challenging for you. But it's still Saturn in your 11th house. You could say three big things that the 11th house represents. It is, first of all, when you have your own business, is the income of your own business. So it's a financial house. It's the friend house, and it's the house of your goals and expectations for the future. So let's start when you have your own business as a financial house. Saturn, the restrictor, slowing down. I mean, do I have to make a picture here? indeed, it can slow down the income. It can slow down the connections. It can, networking. It can indeed make it a little bit, but is it therefore bad? Not at all, because there is a purpose here. Saturn in the 11th wants you to have better income and more structured income when it passes the 11th house and goes into the 12th. So this shows that this means actually hard work. So if you are prepared to work hard, to work good on your structure when it comes to your financial structure of your business, to become very organized when it comes to networking, when it comes to the people you do business with, when it comes to the networks and so on. So I would definitely not recommend, if you're starting your own business and doing and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and so on, no, less is more. So you could, from scratch, for instance, start with a YouTube channel and do that in a very Saturnial, hardworking way, which is consistent, which is each week making 2 or 3 videos and so on. So when Saturn goes out of this 11th house, you will have the reward. I forgot to say that in the introduction, but Saturn, after it went through a house, you get the rewards of your efforts that you did. So definitely Saturn in the 11th house financially can mean that you have to work a little bit harder. But remember, if you're doing it in a consistent way, in a structured way, by the rules, which is Saturn, you will do well. You could also have, when it comes to people that you're going to attract, now more on a friends level. So that Saturn in the 11th house cools down a little bit. You know, it's Saturn after all. That it's a bit harder for you to connect with people on a heart level, but it's actually, in fact, that you could have, after this transit is gone, that you could have very heart-to-heart kind of friends. That is the result. And that is also, friends could be hard work at this moment. So in other words, that you will have to invest a little bit more. So when you are someone that has natally Jupiter in the 11th, for instance, you don't have to work for your friends. They just come. It's very naturally. And but now with Saturn transiting, it can mean that you have to invest a little bit more. That and there's no particular reason. It can just mean that you have 3 or 4 friends and they all have now babies. They're all having babies and have less time for you. So you have to give a little bit more of an effort to connect with them. But still, there can be also some distance there. I mean, emotionally, because Pisces is an emotional sign, that you could feel like a little bit more distance and a little bit more not coming from the heart, from your side and from their side. So it is important to investigate why that is. And it is important also what you can deliver to your friends and vice versa. So in a good way, this is boundaries with friends. So if you have been dealing with a friend or friends that just cross your boundaries, that are just taking advantage of you, you're not going to want that anymore. And vice versa, if you have been really welcoming a lot of support from a friend or friends, they're going to say now to you, I have to do this or that. So they are going to be restricting a little bit more. So whatever it is, embrace it. Work hard on the relationships that you want. Less is more is definitely a sign here. On a more general level, it could mean that you connect with someone that is a bit older, that is a bit more mature, and that this is more like a teacher, but a tough teacher for you. That is also very often with the 11th house. And with the goals, it's better to have 2 goals than 20, right? With Saturn crossing your 11th house, it's good to really manage and master with a plan the goals that you have for the future, whether that is starting up a business or wanting to learn something in the future, whatever it is, make a plan and stick to it and work on it consistently. Saturn rules your 9th house and your 10th house. So it could definitely mean work and also the way that you think, and the way that you learn things and that you take in information on a broader level, that there is a bit more structure here. So that's for Taurus people. Geminis, this is a very, you could say, important transit because it's happening in a key area of your life, which is the 10th house. Saturn in the 10th house is all about career. If you're not having a career, it can be apparent as well. And so let's start with the parents. So Saturn in the 10th house can mean that a parent is going through some challenges that are hard for them. It can also mean a cooling down with a parent. I mean, in the connection, that there is some, Saturnal vibes going on there for whatever the reason is. A cooling down or some sort of a separation as well, but definitely one that is meant to be like that, and that has to do more the separation with a bit of a distance and a bit of maturity. So like an 18-year-old can have this and they go to college, for instance, right? So Saturn rules, because Saturn rules the 9th house for you, which is learning and teaching, but also the 8th house. So there is a lot of transformation here as well going on around career. So I've seen it many times when you are a bit older, like if you say 35 and onwards, and having Saturn in the 10th house, I often see that people are having big careers and big responsibilities in careers. So not necessarily easier, because Saturn is a bit like heavy after all, but it is definitely more maturing. So for those of you who want maturity and a leadership in a career, it's definitely on with Saturn here. But it's not so that you will have a lot of this going on. That's not going to be the case. It's hard work, consistent work, it's day by day work, and it can mean indeed a bit heavy workload. But after all, it has to do with you taking on a role of leadership and being ready for it. You know, sometimes I've seen it even of quite some young people having this transit and dealing with quite a lot of responsibility in their jobs, and they are able to do that as well. So definitely a cycle as well that that you could close here with Saturn through the 10th house. And yes, I think when you are not afraid of working hard, if you're afraid of working hard, if you are afraid of responsibilities and tasks that you need to do to learn something, then you're not going to like this, you know. Then it's always like that. If we fight the energy that is there, it becomes, you know, tough. So welcome the responsibilities and you will have success in career. Cancerians, this is happening in a fellow water sign. So in your 9th house, the house of learning, teaching, traveling. So this is definitely a good thing for you because Saturn trines your energy, but it rules your 7th house and your 8th house. So it can also have to do with a significant other person, intimacy, that there is some sort of a shift in how you think. I've seen it many times when people have Saturn in the 9th, they start a new study, you know, that's going to take the amount of years, like in this case, 3 years. And the amount of study that they're doing is quite heavy. It's quite heavy. It's quite broad, right? So it demands a lot of consistency. So it demands a repetition. And when you're open for that, it's really, really positive. Or you could learn a new language, for instance, and that, you know, something that is totally different than your language. Like, for instance, I speak Flemish. Learning Chinese would be totally, totally different. Learning English is not so difficult for a Flemish person. You see, so something totally, totally different, and it takes a lot of years. Saturn crossing your 9th house can be super, super good because it's when Saturn then crosses your 10th house, you're going to apply it immediately in your work. So for study, it's very good, especially if you want to study hard. and if you want to study something broad, because it's Pisces, and you want to structure it. Another thing that could be is having better boundaries in your thoughts. So maybe as a Cancerian, having Pisces in the 9th house, you see it big and you have a big view. You know, mostly people with Cancer risings have that because of the Pisces 9th house. And they have a lot of trust in the universe, and that's all good and well. But now, because of circumstances, they need to be a little bit more practical. They need to be a little bit more like traveling as well. Traveling can be at its best when you're doing it for business. When you're doing it for business or for learning, for pleasure, it's a bit more tricky because Saturn, after all, is a very serious planet. So maybe maybe read some serious books then that can help you out. But all in all, a very it's like structuring your ideas of life, and it could be going towards a little bit more seriousness. Now, if you are someone who's very buoyant, this can be very good. If you're someone who's already very serious, you have to watch out here for not seeing too doomed and things all too heavily. But again, Saturn trines your sign, you will do well. Leos, Saturn is in your 8th house, and Saturn rules the 7th house of relationships and the 6th house of work. So that could also get into the mixture of transformation. This is a big one because the 8th house is a very challenging house to understand. It has to do with a lot of psychological stuff. It has to do with death and rebirth. It also is a financial house. Let's start with that. So during those years, it could mean that because of a relationship, because of a new relationship or an established one, that you are doing investments, that you are taking on a loan, and that it is hard work. With Saturn in the 8th house, it can really make it a bit tougher to not only to structure the finances that you share with another person, the same with business. So it can also mean like the investments you do together with a business partner. There is a lot of work to be done here. So it could mean that, for instance, I know a lot of people who had businesses, during the time of Corona, the virus, that they had to stop their loans and they had to reconsider it and to improve it in a way and to shift it to become more practical. That kind of stuff. I know it sounds boring, but if you have a business, it could mean something like that. Of course, not with the Corona, but something in that kind of area. Now, or you're just with your spouse, you want to buy a house, and you want to do that, and you want to do that the right way. So you want to make sure that insurances and all of that is you're spending a lot of time there. It's also advisable to, if you don't know anything about that, that you bring in someone that knows, a financial person that can help you with that, because it also rules your 7th house, which is also your mentors, your helpers, so to speak, when it comes to teachers in a way, and helping you out there. On another level, this is intimacy. So Saturn cools down. So it could mean that because of your situation, all of a sudden you are single, for instance, and now you're having Saturn crossing the 8th house, which is like a lack of intimacy or a slowing down of that, or not so easy to show your vulnerabilities, is something that often happens with Saturn in the 8th house. But it is there to teach you something. It is there actually ultimately after this cycle that you are better and more mature with sharing yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with someone else. So it's about a growing up cycle here, for sure. And so intimacy could mean, because again, a circumstance, if you are in a relationship, that there is something that is slowing down this area of your life of intimacy, and that you could feel like, hey, I can't connect so well anymore with someone who's so close to me. But that has to do with yourself as well, of course. So a lot of introspection and psychological understanding of the self, going to a psychologist, therapist, astrologer is a very good thing when Saturn crosses your 8th house. Now, and what else was the 8th house? Yeah, that's about it. Virgos, this is happening in your relationship sector. So you're having Saturn in your 7th house, the house of relationships, which is a romantic relationship or a business partnership. It also rules your 6th house. So it can indeed be related to work, but also the 5th house, Saturn, is ruling. So it's definitely about love. So whether you are in a relationship or not, this is definitely a test. And this is definitely, in a good way, to put more structures and boundaries in a relationship. So I've seen it often that people with Saturn crossing the 7th house, when they were the person that was too much giving, too much, no boundaries at all, that all of a sudden they had it. They had it. And it's kind of a projection. It could also be the other way, that you're maybe you are single, and with Saturn in the 7th house, the people that you're going to attract are going to be criticizing you, maybe in a way that, if you see it in a positive way, that you are maturing. It's the people that you come across now are some sort of teachers, but not in the Jupiterian kind of way that is very, open-hearted and very buoyant. It's more in a way of seriousness. Like in a partnership, Saturn could be the partner that is, should you really do that new job? Are you really capable? Do you have all the diplomas for that? That is the Saturn partner that you're about to attract. If you are in a relationship, it could simply mean that your partner is criticizing you a little bit more, or that there is something in the relationship that needs to be reviewed, and that has to do with boundaries. So in a way, if definitely, it doesn't mean to say, in the book Saturn in the 7th house, it's done with the relationship. Not always, but definitely you will have to change something for sure. But yes, if it is a relationship, right, and especially when one, either or the other, is crossing boundaries in a way, this could indeed show the ending of a relationship, because Saturn is a very karmic kind of planet. Or there's something Saturnal going on in the life of the partner. That could be the case as well. Like a partner that is depressed, for instance, could mean that. But again, it has an effect on you, and it has an effect on why is this person like that. It's a lot about introspection around relationships. It could also be a bit of a cooling down, that it is more about responsibilities, like a couple, for instance, that Saturn crosses the 7th house. I remember that was the case with me, that I had a child then. So it was not that it was bad, but you see your partner in a different way. You see literally your partner as a father. For me, it was quite literal. And it's more responsibility, it's more, there's more of a heaviness and a maturity there. But Saturn in the 7th house is actually not bad, you could say, in the sign of Libra. But when you're someone who really wants to party and and if you love that, it's a bit slower here. It's less is more, less is more, and it can be what they say, a lot of work, a lot of work together, a lot of more planning and more structure in the relationship, but ultimately it's for the good, again, when you're having a child and you're having Saturn through the 7th house, it's very common, it's like, yeah, you have to work a little bit harder on the relationship. And the same with business partner. So you could attract a very serious business partner who has knowledge, is a bit older maybe. And so it doesn't necessarily has to be a bad thing. So try to see it as good as you can see it. And but definitely boundaries with the business partner is very important there. Librans, this is happening in your 6th house, Saturn in Libra, and Saturn rules the 4th and the 5th house. So this is a lot about your health and your work, but also you could say, and in that way, feeling emotionally content, the 4th house, and the 5th house, how you enjoy yourself, basically. So Saturn in the 6th house, when you are like in a job and you have Saturn crossing the 6th house, it can mean really, it's like that, right? It's like all those responsibilities, and I have to do a lot of routines, and I have to do, a lot of learning and a lot of things that are a bit boring even. But when that is the case, with Saturn crossing your 6th house, I mean, you can leave that job, but you will attract kind of the same job, right? Because of this energy. Now, when you think that having Saturn through the 6th house, it can be very good to become a little bit more disciplined, definitely in the sign of Pisces. Maybe you are used to your day-to-day life not to be too disciplined, right, in the work. And maybe you have a business of your own, or you do work for a company, but your administration is a bit all over the place. Now, this can really learn and teach you in a slowly but surely way how to deal better with those little details, so that in the long run you benefit from that. So it's actually a very economical way of doing your work, and which is not fun whilst you're doing it, but when it's putting the foundations, basically, right? It's like, I compare it always with the mail merging that you're doing. You have like 1,000 of clients. If you're going to do in a classical, non-coordinated way, the mail for 1,000 clients, and you're going to each and single person writing them the same mail, it's going to be so chaotic, first of all, and you don't know where you are, and it's going to take a long time. But if you're structuring this, it will take time to learn this, how to do it, the mail merge, I mean, and Excel and whatever, and it will be very to do it. But once you put some hours into it, in this case, it's gonna be a bit more than hours, but anyway, if you put effort in it, in the long run, it's your learning school, right? So it could mean that, for instance, you're an architect, or you just had your degree, and now you have for 2 to 3 years, you have to learn, right? You have to learn the job. That could be Saturn in the 6th house. So embrace it, definitely embrace it, and then it will make it easier. And another level is, of course, health. So with Saturn in the 6th, it could mean that there is something that has to do with your health that you need to address. Saturn, maturity, being mature, and doing the more classical things will help you, because that's what Saturn is all about. So, and with classical things, I also mean repetition, and like maybe Pisces. What is Pisces all about? The feet, for instance. Maybe you're struggling with your feet or whatever, and Saturn is obliging you with doing a little bit more structure, having a look at what it is that you have, and doing this slowly but surely. Maybe there is a blood circulation problem or whatever, and you are changing your life in your disciplines of a day-to-day life that you're doing. And because of that, you eat better, you do some more exercises, and so on. And that process can take some years, but ultimately it will become a habit. And once it becomes a habit, you don't know that you're doing it. It's not so hard anymore. It's like the first day in the gym, right? It's dying, you could say, figuratively. But when you're doing it regularly, you kind of start enjoying it. So a lot of things that are done by repetition can be here very interesting for you. And so definitely for your health, if you are doing something more of a structure in your day-to-day life, and because this is Pisces, so your 6th house is Pisces, so that means that people with a Libra rising and having Pisces at the 6th house, it means that they don't like structure in their day-to-day routines. But now it's different. Sometimes we have transits that are with our blueprint, and sometimes not. And this is the case. So putting structure here into your day-to-day life, it might be very boring now, but within a couple of years, you're going to reap the fruits for that, and you're definitely going to see this in a very positive way, and to be emotionally more secure as it rules the 4th house, and also that you can enjoy your life better. It also rules the 5th house. Scorpios, this is your 5th house that Saturn is transiting. And keep in mind that Pisces is a fellow water sign. So for you, this goes nicely. The Saturn, it kind of supports you, this eternal energy. So that is already a good thing. But of course, it's Saturn. So Saturn in the 5th can mean a cooling down of everything that you enjoy. And the things that we do from the heart, it's not so easy with Saturn crossing the 5th house. And it can be very simple, that simply because of your circumstances, maybe you just had a baby and it's really hard for you because you can't go out, you can't, or there is a lot of planning to do. That could be Saturn in the 5th house, or maybe you want to have a child. And with Saturn in the 5th, it can take a while before before you get pregnant, for instance, and all of that thing. So it's about slowing down, and it's about cooling down as well. Also, the love department, the 5th house is the house of the heart. So if you're single, for instance, it can mean that you don't feel it anymore to connect with people, or it's like the heart is not there, and you don't know what to do. And it has to do, of course, with investigating and understanding the self, and understanding and exploring what you truly want in life and what brings you joy. So, and that will take a bit of time there in investigating that and in exploring. It could also mean that a child of yours is growing through a phase where through some sort of a Saturnal phase, so where they're going through maybe a rough time, or they slow down in a way, right? And or are not so. Maybe you had a child that was very buoyant, and all of a sudden in its teenage years, it's becoming very serious, and so you have to work hard on that connection, and you don't feel the heartfelt energy anymore towards your child. But again, it's meant to be Saturn in the 5th house, and it's how you deal with it. So you know it, that this is a temporary thing, and you know it, that this is, although it may look weird, it's the path that your child is going through. And but in a very simple way, it could mean that you have a couple of years ahead, very busy at work, and therefore you can't enjoy yourself so much. So it's really also a learning, or you could do a hobby where there is some discipline needed. Could be that as well. That is at its best. I think as horse riding, dress. Oh, I don't know the word in English. This is dressure. Oh, how do you say that? The games that they do with the horses, they have to jump over all sorts of things. I think that's a very Saturn and Pisces kind of energy. Anyway, Sagittarians, this is happening in your 4th house. It's a very important transit. It's a key area of your life that has to do with your emotions. And also it has to do with a parent, so your ancestry, your upbringing, and also it has to do with literally your home. So let's start with the easiest. It could literally mean that you are changing homes, but that is not really going in the most expansive, buoyant way, like you're having Jupiter transiting and Mars, your 4th house, for instance. No, it's Saturn. It means there's a lot of work to do, and you will see it also as a lot of work. You might see it worse than it is. But that's Saturn crossing the 4th house. So it could take ages, it seems, to do the transition from one home to another. It can be as simple as that. So I've seen a lot of people going back to their home country, for instance, when they live in another country, Saturn in the fourth, and they have to, because of circumstances. For instance, a parent needs some assistance, and because they're having a health problem, for instance. Again, it doesn't mean to say that this is going to occur. These are general horoscopes, but it could mean that you have to take some responsibility in taking care of a parent. Also, it can mean a cooling in the connection, a cooling down of a connection with a parent. That goes naturally, or that is really, yes, that has an effect on you on an emotional level. And therefore, it forces you to be more mature. So you can have this at any age, but it really forces the person to find emotional security within themselves rather than from a parent, basically. So, yes, it depends on your story, but the general feeling, or the higher octave of a Saturn going through the fourth house, is definitely that you are emotionally more mature, so that you're not so much reacting, but that you are responding to circumstances, and that you are very self-sufficient, that you are being your own parent, so to speak. And another thing could mean that it is not so easy to relax at home. Like maybe you're working from home, or you're doing a lot of stuff at home, and you find rest a little bit more difficult to find. That could be one of the cases as well. And but definitely a positive thing after this transit is done is emotional understanding of the self, and dealing with your emotions in a totally new way. And that is a good thing for sure. Capricorns, this is happening in your third house, and this is the house of, you could say, communication, short trips, and also a social house, siblings and neighbors. So people in the neighborhood, you could say, that you get in touch with, every single day because you do your groceries. That is a third house connection. So there is a cooling down here happening, and it can have to do a lot with you because you are Saturn. Saturn is your ruler in the third house, and also with your value, because it also rules your second house. Now, what does it mean? It could mean, let's start with the biggest thing, communication. So it could mean that you learn something. You learn a skill. You learn how to drive, for instance. And you're doing that. Are you going to do that for 3 years? Well, I'll tell you what, I actually had just Saturn in the third house, and I started with picking up again the driving and so on. And now that Saturn is leaving it, it seems to be like, yeah, I've got it under control. But it was not 3 years in a row that I had to take every single day lessons. It was consistent, though. I had to do this in a consistent way. But sometimes, it's like you pick it up again, and then you leave it, and then you pick it up again, and then you leave it. It's going to make it hard. So the more consistent you are, the better you are. It could also mean that you learned something, that you're doing a workshop, that you're doing something, a study that teaches you something that is hands-on, like knitting or some sort of a skill, basically. It's really associated with skills here. And that but it's not like, oh, it's fun and all of that, it's like serious, and I want to do this, and because of I want to have some more skills, maybe for work or whatever, or for earning more money. It rules your second house as well. Well, after this transit, the chances are big that if you've done this in a consistent way, you are going to benefit from it years and years, 30 years after this, you could say, because that's the cycle of Saturn. So what you learn here, it might be a bit more hard for you to do, but if you are consistent and you keep on going, you will get the reward. It could also mean the way that you think becomes a little bit more serious. So of course, depending on if you are a writer, for instance, this could be a very good time of writing a book very consistently and very, very focused. And it's like, wow, it's deep. It can be an esoteric idea, which is Pisces, but Saturn is like, I'm breaking it down and I'm going to write something practical about this. So structuring your mind is very much Saturn in the third house. But in a negative way, you have to, if you are already quite in your way of thinking, a bit anxious and too serious, you have to watch out that you don't go too far with this, because Saturn in the third can make you a bit more fearful and speaking your truth, in communicating, and also in your connections with siblings and with neighbors. It could mean a cooling down in a natural way, but also on a positive level, to have better boundaries with these people, so that they have better boundaries with you and you have better boundaries with them. So there can be certainly an issue here with siblings and with neighbors with boundaries. And it will take some time to work on this, because Pisces and Saturn there, that's karmic, you know. And if you have done the relationship with your sibling for, let's say, 40 years the same way, and now you know that you have to change it, it's not going to come very easily, but it comes with little efforts every single day to have healthier boundaries. Like when you say no, that is not going to be a drama, but that, you know, they take it and they hear you. So people hearing you in the right way and vice versa is not always going to be easy, but it's definitely here a process of Saturn going through your third house. Short trips and so on, yes, if done for business. If not, it's a bit tougher for you to enjoy yourself here with the Saturn. So unless you're learning something or you're wanting to learn something, it can be really good energy. Aquarians, yes, Saturn is out of your sign and now it's entering your second house. And Saturn rules you in ancient astrology and also your 12th house. So this has to do a lot with Saturn in the first house establishing new ways of living, new boundaries with people as well. For sure, with Saturn in your sign, it's about boundaries. You having better boundaries with others and others having better boundaries with you. And now entering your second house is, in a nutshell, your finances, but it's also your worth and your talents and your assets, your belongings. So with Saturn through the second house, it can mean that you have to work a little bit harder to earn the money, that you have to hustle for the money. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. So don't panic when you're saying like, oh, I'm earning less money than before, or this or that. It's by being economical that you are going to be more successful after this. When I had Saturn going through my second house, I really thought like, I have to work so hard for, you know, for something that I thought would be much easier. But I saw, okay, I have Saturn in the second house, so I better embrace it. So I did. I tried to make good structures in my work. And it doesn't matter if you work for yourself or for another person, to have better structure in what you're doing, your talents, to maybe you won't feel so confident with your talents when Saturn goes through the second house, but then work on them. Use the fear of not having enough money to feed it with your talents and with the things that you still need to learn in order for you to embrace it, or to do something extra so that you can use that as a bridge, so to speak. and make sure that the structures of your finances is healthier. When you spend time of that, I can assure you that when Saturn leaves your second house, it's a totally new world. So with Saturn in your second house, it's very difficult to believe in abundance when it comes to material stuff, to money. You know, you could watch all the YouTube videos and blah, 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 but Saturn is not there for thinking that scarcity is the whole thing. Saturn is there for working. And because Saturn in the second is often having a fear of not having enough the money that you have. I'm not having enough money. But if you use the fear, as a motivator to work harder and to get better and to become better, then when this transit is done, you will see the result, and you will see that it is consistent and it is for the long run that you have a better financial situation. So don't panic when you see Saturn in your second house. It's the same for your self-worth. Self-worth can be low when Saturn crosses the second house, and it can be because of you think that you're not good enough. It's a typical thing, but you can if you are, be very rational with that, right? And be very compassionate towards yourself. Pisces energy, that where you are at now doesn't mean to say that it's going to be like that for the rest of your years here, but that you are going to work. If you have okay, I want to have this or that, it's like the tragic of that. It's a journey. It's the Piscean, Saturn and Piscean journey of accumulating this knowledge, these talents, this confidence. It comes from self, right? The self-confidence. It doesn't come from others. It comes from you doing the work. So this is not the time to rely on other people's money, or, of course, it can be welcome, but that's not the lesson that Saturn wants you to teach here. It wants you to become self-sufficient, and it wants you to do it in a very consistent way. And last but not least, of course, Saturn in Pisces, right? For Pisceans, the first house, this is your time to have a rebirth without being born again. It's a symbolic rebirth for sure. Again, it depends a little bit on your age. If you're very, very young, this can be a bit harsh and challenging because you will have to be very mature and very old for your age. It's that typical transit. But if you are a little bit older, this is very welcoming because it means that you've been preparing while Saturn was in Aquarius, the decluttering, the saying and releasing old karmic family patterns that hasn't been serving you for years, and now you can make your new pattern. So it's like a new rebirth, but a slow one. So it's like, especially for you Pisceans who've had relationships where you say, people walk all over me, I feel like a doormat, this is your time. Because you have Saturn in the first house, you're going to have boundaries, or you're going to set them for sure. That's the energy is with you, right? It can be vice versa as well. But for most people with a Pisces rising, this will mean that they can say no way better than ever before, because they have to, because of life circumstances as well. And because they feel they are ready. You are ready. When Saturn crosses your ascendant. I remember when Saturn crossed my ascendant, I did full-time the astrology. So it's a new birth, it's a new job. But it's also, you could say, and Saturn rules your 11th house of goals and wishes, and also your 12th house. So it's like setting up this new plan. And I remember it was hard work because it's your responsibility. Starting a business of your own, you are responsible, no one else, unless you have people who work for you. But that's how it works. And so it's definitely for those of you who've been struggling with boundaries, who've been struggling with boundaries to yourself, this is a good one, because it's about self-love, and it's not like eating a whole package of biscuits. That is not, that you love yourself. That's not what I mean. It's like eating like 2 or 3. That is self-love. and eating maybe the whole package in the weekend, whatever. But you see, there's a very maturing energy surrounding you. And I've seen that a lot with people who have Saturn in the first house, that they are welcoming this energy. So for those of you who don't want to take responsibility, who don't want to look at their life in a serious way, who don't want to improve themselves, who don't want to work on themselves, that is heavy, right? So it can also mean, I think for a lot of Pisceans, it's a good thing, because Pisces tends to be very open and very, you could say, it's a buoyant energy, right? It loves so tremendously largely, and Saturn is like making it more practical, and it's like less is more. And also your time that you devote to people and to yourself, it's more in a structured way, and because of that you feel that you are getting somewhere in life. So on a healthy level, on a health level, it's also less is more. So if you're a bit older and you're having Saturn crossing your ascendant, it means slow down a little bit, right? Don't listen to your body, for sure, with Saturn crossing your first house. So you could be having some, the problems on the feet, and you have to do something structurally with that, new shoes, or maybe a little bit more than just new shoes, well, whatever. But it has to do with taking care of yourself in a very mature way, in a bit of a more serious way, you could say. And it could make some Pisceans a bit more anxious because, but in a good way, I mean, like as a motivator to not do like the whole thing, or go the whole way, and getting themselves into trouble. So so if you're welcoming that, Saturn can definitely show here a new way also of relationships. So I've seen it many, many times. When people have Saturn crossing their first house, they have new relationships, because they are new. They are like a different person. And it could also mean that some people will leave, on a romantic level, business partner as well. It could mean that the ones that were no good for you, that they leave now. And because you say so, right? Because you're drawing a line in the sand, that's very much Saturn in your first house. That was a lot, and in a nutshell, of course, but I hope it was helpful for all of you. Enjoy the Saturn and Pisces, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.